In the Voice of Russia World Service, welcome to another edition of our regular feature, The Christian Message from Moscow. Today we'll be reading from a novel written by contemporary Orthodox author and journalist Alexander Poliakov. Alexander spent his childhood years in a small village in Kazakhstan, where his father worked as a construction engineer and his mother was a doctor. The family later moved to Gatchina outside Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. It was then and there that Alexander fell in love with literature and started writing his first poems. After school he spent a few years doing metalwork and hauling loads before implementing his lifelong dream and entering the journalism department of Leningrad University. Graduating 5 years later, Alexander Poliakov spent some time traveling across the Soviet Union, maturing and honing his reporting skills. His first posting as a professional journalist was the port city of Magadan on the Sea of Okhotsk, where he wrote his first stories. In the 1970s, Alexander moved to Moscow, signing up with the authoritative Izvestia newspaper. It was much later that Alexander embraced the Orthodox creed and was baptized, a major turnaround that coincided with his work on his first major novel, The Fiery Abba. The book recounts the feats of life accomplished by a Russian count of mixed British and Swedish descent, Edward Sievers, who later became a Russian Orthodox monk. Edward Sievers had experienced his full share of hardships, but he never once bowed to the odds, always driven by his unfailing faith in the Lord. In our today's program, we'll be reading extracts from Alexander Poliakov's novel, The Fiery Abba.
My mother was English, Edward Sievers, already elder Sampson, later taught his spiritual children. She fled to Russia and served as a governess in a merchant's household, tutoring his children. Then, during a chance visit to St. Petersburg, she met my father, Count Sievers, at a ball, married him, and forever stayed in St. Petersburg. She obtained Russian citizenship and applied for a royal permission for her children to be baptized in the Anglican High Church. One day, Edward Sievers dropped in at the Saviour-on-Water's church in St. Petersburg. It was a small church built in commemoration of the Russian sailors who were killed in the Tsushima battle, fought during Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905. There he saw icons salvaged from the sunken Russian warships, and the names of the sailors and officers who died that day written on the walls. There was a divine liturgy going on, and the choirmen, tall and well-built all, and dressed as Baltic Fleet sailors, singing in the stalls. Edward did not understand a word of what was being said or sung, but he still felt the power inherent in that singing. He was scared, but the next day he was back there again. He kept coming back every Sunday. One day, Edward found himself standing right in front of the Holy Cross. The church's beneficiary, Father Mikhail, a perspicacious 90-year-old man, a one-time sailor himself, caught sight of the un-Russian-looking young man. "What's your name?" the priest inquired. "Edward, Father," stuttered the young man. "Edward? And coming here? Strange. And what is it that you like in here?" "Everything," the angular Eddie replied. And suddenly, his voice firming up, he added, "I want to be Orthodox." "Good for you," Father Mikhail said, adjusting the cross on his white chest. "And how do you read, 'Hallowed be thy name' in the Lord's Prayer? What does it mean, 'Hallowed be thy name'? Explain." "You don't know, do you? And you call this being Orthodox? Come back next year and I will make you Orthodox. And remember, nothing is clever that is not done with a prayer. Go inside yourself, look into your conscience, which is the voice of God speaking in the human soul. And never count on anyone's advice, only on the manifestations of God's divine will." Shortly afterwards, he wrote down in his diary, "I'm lonesome, and I have got to go against my father, mother, and all my relatives. Not to fight them, but to go inside me and pray hard, so that I have no doubts left inside me. No one will tell me which way to go. Only the Lord Himself. He will find the way." Once, it was after the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, just as he was walking along the cast-iron fence of the Church of Holy Simeon and Anna, Edward heard a voice calling to him. "What are you thinking about, young man?" He looked around and saw two middle-aged Orthodox monks in long robes with crosses and chaplets. His heart jumped. God's messengers. And much to his surprise, he said, "Well, I would like to have a better idea of a monastic service. I would like to enter a monastery to get first-hand knowledge of what it is all about." Everything was going fine, simple and reasonable. And it seemed that all he had to do was just to give a little help to some mystical, providential movement. They reached Pskov early in the morning. "I can't believe it," he thought. "A young English woman once arrived here. My mother. Who could have imagined then that some day her son would come to that very same city to novitiate in a Russian monastery?" Suddenly, he felt shivers running down his spine. Where am I going? Where are they taking me? But it was too late now to back off. Hegumen Vasily was kind to him. "It is good you are here," he smiled. "But do you feel strong enough to keep the monastic vows? If not, you'd better not take them at all, because if you are not diligent enough, you might find yourself excommunicated." His first obedience was to wash the cows, about 50 in all. Athletic and strong, he made easy work of hauling around barrels of water he was taking from the nearby well. "That's all. Live your life the way you like it. That's what real monasticism is all about, not the life we all live," he said. In the winter, Edward returned to St. Petersburg, which, because of the ongoing war with Germany, had been renamed to Petrograd. He was all set to continue his education at the medical academy there. In May, he got back to the monastery. There were dark clouds already gathering above it, though. Once, exactly 3 hours before his arrest, the young Sivers, who had already acquired the monastic name of Simeon, had a dream where St. Seraphim of Sarov entered his cell, bent over the sleeping Simeon, and slowly and very clearly started praying to the Holy Mother. Simeon had never heard that prayer before, but he somehow knew it right away, that the most merciful Virgin would save and protect him. But what is it? What was burning hot on his brow? Holy Jesus, those were the tears falling down from the saint's eyes. Simeon did not dare to wipe them away, and in his dream he lay quietly, fearing to move. To make sure he did not forget that wonderful prayer, he tried to whisper every beneficial word. Much to his surprise, he did not forget a thing, and waking up in the morning, wrote down the most merciful first thing. The moment he was finished, the door of his cell swung open. There were blurred silhouettes of armed men seen swaying eerily in the doorway. "That's it, Holy Joe. Come out." Simeon turned towards the Chekists. His face lit up with a happy smile. The most merciful was already filling him up with God-inspired Easter joy. Spending a month or so in the local jailhouse, High Monk Simeon was exiled to the Solovki Islands, which the Bolsheviks had turned into one big labor camp for the so-called enemies of the people. The jail train, consisting of squeaky carriages with cages inside, inched its way to its destination a whole week. Each cage contained 3 inmates. They could neither walk nor just sit up there. It was too crammed inside, and the guards would not let them anyway. You've got to forget, at least for a moment, all those whispers and moans, because a monk is called upon to serve God, and no one but God, and not to know anyone in this world. To love people only for the sake of God and in God. No, the Immaculate would not abandon him in his predicament, would protect him all those 18 years of labor camps, jails, and exiles. Prayer was a kind of food High Monk Simeon would never ever have enough of. It was in a labor camp near Komsomolsk-on-the-Amur in the Far East that High Monk Simeon learned about the German invasion of this country. After work, in the dead of night, as the rest of the block was sound asleep, he was praying for Russia. The war was now going in Europe. The Königsberg fortress had already fallen, and the decree to release jailed monks and priests was already out. But the camp's chief just wouldn't let Father Simeon go. By then, Simeon had long ceased to be a prisoner, though, working as a camp doctor and making visits to the village dispensary, where he would occasionally take medicines and spend hours chatting with Kuzma Shantarsky, the local paramedic. The camp's chief just hated to lose such a good doctor. This priest has something more than drugs to treat people with, the chief thought. He's got something else, but I just don't know what. And then the high monk made up his mind to get out of there, and started putting together things he needed for the getaway. There was no way he could hide all those things in the camp, so the monk-turned-doctor smuggled out food and clothes and left it all with Shantarsky for safekeeping. He was westward bound now. He really was. And again, there was the measured, steely movement of the freight train. Endless kilometers walked across forests, fields, and along dried-up riverbeds. And then the train again. Kazakhstan already behind him. Simeon, drained and emaciated, was now moving across Kyrgyzia. He knew it full well now that he would never be able to cross that never-ending desert. There came the sound of an engine revving. The high monk turned around. There was a small airplane standing about 100 meters away, old and battered, as if it had come right from the World War I battlefield. There was nowhere the poor fugitive could hide now, so he walked right up to the pilot who was fixing something in the engine, and calmly, as if he were asking about the weather, inquired where the man was headed, and if he would give him a lift. The pilot started, and turned his tanned and mustachioed face towards the stranger. Then, with a wave of the hand, he cried out loud and with joyful abandon, "All right, hop in, but hold on tight, 'cause I've got no rope to strap you in." It was only then that Simeon finally managed to see what kind of plane it really was. 2 planks of wood instead of seats, thin plywood walls, and just emptiness under your feet, nothing to cling on to. Kicking up a cloud of dust, the plane rolled down the improvised runway and went up into the scorching sky. Simeon crossed himself, grabbed the end of the wooden plank nearest him, and started singing prayers and psalms. Then there came the air pits that seemed to last forever. Simeon was trying hard not to look down, his eyes glued to the back of the pilot's head. He was feeling sick and about to black out any time, coming to at the very last moment, when his arms were already giving way and his legs dangling hopelessly above the abyss. "That's it. Hold on," the pilot called to him 3 agonizing hours later. "We are landing." Simeon firmly shook the pilot's hand. "Going to the city?" the man asked. "Move down this road. Tashkent is 5 kilometers away from here. Wish you luck. You know, I'm glad you made it in one piece. I really am." At long last, Simeon met with Metropolitan Antony, who, without asking too many questions, simply gave him a parish in a Cossack village near Stavropol in southern Russia. The new priest quickly became everyone's darling. "Father Simeon is really so special. There is no one else like him. He started the divine service on Good Wednesday, and today is already Sunday, Easter. But the service is still going on, day and night. Can you believe it?" People kept pouring in to shrive, and as soon as the service was over, Father Simeon was working again, tending to his flock. From Stavropol alone, he gave communion to nearly 13,000 pilgrims. In the morning, there came the terrible news that they were going to arrest the priest. There were mice in the cell he was thrown in. With these little creatures around, he did not feel so lonesome. And still, there were some moments when he thought they had just locked him up forever. One morning, however, they took him to the all-too-familiar office, and a colonel sitting there told him, "You are free to go, but forget you were here. It is for your own good." The years spent in jails and labor camps did have their toll on Father Simeon. "My health deteriorated," he later recalled. "I became paralyzed and spent a whole year in bed. That was a time of many joys and sorrows, and all that time I enjoyed the endless love of my beloved spiritual children. And I solaced myself. I can say that I am a rich man, because what I was denied of in terms of worldly joys, I more than made up for with what His Holiness the Patriarch calls the fit of elderhood. I am happy to be a pastor, an Orthodox priest, and a monk, having taken the vows of schema. You know, if I died today and resurrected again, I would want to be a monk again. A Russian Orthodox higher schema monk. That's the best reward you can hope for in this life. How happy we are to be Orthodox and be administered a holy sacrament, be healed, and repent our sins. We triumph by humbling ourselves, and we are the prime guarantors of our salvation. We should always think about prayer, slow, repenting, crying, and filled with heartfelt humbling, because this is exactly what we need to be saved.
And there we end this edition of the Christian Message from Moscow, where we read excerpts from the novel The Fiery Abba by Orthodox writer Alexander Poliakov. The program was recorded by sound engineer Nadezhda Smirnova, radio adaptation by Olga Troshina, editor Tatiana Shvetsova, and your hosts were Svetlana Yakmenko
and Pavel Novichkov. God save you from all evil, both visible and invisible.
Thank you for being with us. Until next time.